Hello everyone and welcome to round 5 of the FIDE Grand Prix in Berlin. In this video we'll have a look at the game between Hikaru Nakamura and Alexander Grischuk. Before this round Hikaru had a half-point lead over Grischuk and Yesipenko, so it wasn't too surprising to see Grischuk taking a lot of risk and trying to go after Hikaru to try to take over the lead. Anyway, Hikaru opened up with the move on d4, Grischuk played knight f6, and after c4, now here usually Grischuk plays the move e6 if he wants to play a bit more solid, but given the fact that he kind of needed the win here, he went for the King's Indian. Now Hikaru went for one of the more topical lines these days, bishop e2, castles, and bishop e3. Now there's a lot of things black can do here. Black can go for c5, this leads to more Benoni type of positions. If white goes d5, e6, knight f3, takes. This is referred to as the Benoni structure. Another move black can choose here is the move knight to c6, but this also becomes very sharp. White usually goes d5, knight e4, knight e5. After knight e5, f4, knight eg4, bishop d2. Black usually plays something like knight h6, and it looks very weird for black with the knight on h6, but somehow it all seems to work out for black. Anyway, in this game Grischuk played the move e5. Hikaru responded with d5 and Grischuk played knight a6. Now, if you're just starting out in chess, this move might look very weird to you, but the point behind this move is that the knight wants to come to c5, put pressure on pawn on e4, and black also does not want to block in the bishop on c8 by putting the knight on d7. Anyway, Hikaru played the move h4, with which he wants to put pressure on black's king side. Knight c5, hitting the pawn on e4, and here you don't really want to play f3, because black has moves like knight h5, preparing f5, or knight g3 and knight f4. Instead of that, Hikaru played queen c2, so he keeps control over the h5 square. So Grischuk played c6, trying to create counterplay in the center and maybe on the queen side. Hikaru played h5, continuing with his plan. And after pawn takes d5, pawn takes d5, queen d5, here he came with quite a surprising solution. He played the move h6. Now it looks very weird, right? Why would you push that h-pawn all the way up the board to then keep the h-file closed, right? But this h-pawn has long-term advantages, right? And also Hikaru wants to play f3 on the next move, strengthening the pawn on e4. And stopping knight g4, and if he goes f3 in the current position, he hangs that pawn on h5, and black's doing very well. So he goes h6, and temporarily this bishop is entombed here on the h8 square. So Hikaru goes f3, strengthening the pawn on e4, bishop d7 by Grischuk, and rook to b1. And up to this point, Hikaru had still been blitzing out all his moves, while Grischuk was already consuming a lot of time. Hikaru was up like soon an hour on the clock. So rook b1, he's preparing the move b4, which would fork the queen and the knight. So Grischuk went knight a4. Now here b4 is not a good move because black goes queen to c7 and you cannot take the knight because that hangs your queen. Alright, so what did Hikaru do? He played queen to d2, and apparently, as was told by my co-host Fiona, this had all been played before. Grischuk traded on c3, queen to c7, g4 by Hikaru. Once again, he was still in his preparation while Grischuk was already taking his time, and Hikaru had a 1 hour lead on the clock. So here Grischuk made an interesting move. He played bishop c8. Now you might be thinking like, wait, why would he undevelop his own bishop? But we'll find out shortly. Hikaru played knight h3 and knight d7. This was Grischuk's points. He wants to maneuver the knight to c5. Also now this bishop on h8 is free to move again. So Hikaru played knight f2, bishop f6, and short castles. Grischuk played bishop e7 and king h2 by Hikaru. Hikaru's just slowly but surely improving the position. Now it looks good for white, right? He has a lot of space, but the one problem is how are you going to break through? The position is fairly blocked. Anyway, Grischuk played knight to c5 and Hikaru played knight to d3, offering the trades of knights. And there's no easy solution here for black. If you trade on d3 and play something like b6, white always has options of going a4, a5, and trying to target your structure that way. And I mean, let's say you let this trade happen over here. This is also not great because white gets a protected d-pawn. So Grischuk played the move b6 so that after the trade he could recapture with the b-pawn. I mean, white has the open b-file, but it's not easy to take use of that because black is covering the entry squares. So what did Hikaru do? He opened up a second front. He played f4. Now once again, black does not have an easy decision to make. I mean, you don't want to let white trade on e5 because white gets a protected passer on d5. This is not ideal. You could play f6, but here white gets a really big space advantage, so this is also not ideal. So Grischuk traded on f4 himself. Hikaru recaptured, but now of course he always has pressure on this d6 pawn, and Hikaru had other ideas. After bishop d7, he played the move c4. Now with the move c4, he wants to go queen c3 and threaten a checkmate on this diagonal. But here Grischuk missed his chance to get back into the game. He should have played the move bishop f6. And actually, there's no way white can take advantage of this discovery on the f-file. I mean, if you move the bishop anywhere, like you cannot take here, because black just takes with a check and you lose. And otherwise, black does get the time to plan the bishop on d4, and at least the bishop will be pretty active there. But Grischuk played the move rook ab8. Now Hikaru found a nasty move. He played queen to c3. He threatens checkmate on g7. So Grischuk had to play f6 to block. Hikaru played rook to b3. A very nice move. So now if Grischuk trades, Hikaru is going to take with the a pawn, and he improves his own structure, and his pawn on a7 is still isolated and now on an open file as well. So Grischuk played rook to b6, sort of with the same idea that if Hikaru trades, he takes with the pawn, he improves his own structure. So what did Hikaru do? He played g5. So he wants to open up the f-file and this diagonal so he could go for checkmate. So Grischuk played rook to f7. Now, and here we have a funny situation. So we saw that black could not take on g5, but simultaneously white also does not want to take on f6, because this improves the black pieces. So Hikaru played bishop to c1, a very nice move, opening up the f-file for his rook, and he's ready to go bishop b2 and put a lot of pressure on this long diagonal. So Grischuk played queen to d8, bishop b2, and queen f8. So once again, like you can take on f6, but then you allow queen takes h6. So this is not ideal, but at the same time, black also does not want to take here due to queen h8 checkmate. So what did Hikaru do? He slowly improved the position. So he played king to g2, bishop d8 by Grischuk. This move was absolutely necessary, because if you make any other move, then white can take here and hits the bishop with a tempo. So Grischuk preemptively steps out of the way, and now Hikaru played queen f3. So he's slowly but surely trying to look for a way through, but it's not easy. Here Grischuk played bishop c8 and Hikaru played queen e3. And here Fiona and I were both wondering, like, what should Hikaru do if Grischuk just decides to sit with a move like bishop d7? I mean, there's no easy way through. It feels like white should win somehow, but it wasn't clear at all. But Grischuk here decides to force matters. He takes on b3, and after pawn takes, now takes on g5. But the question is what he missed in the long variation that we will see shortly. So Hikaru played the move queen c3, and he's threatening checkmate on this diagonal. And black doesn't have an easy way to block it, because if you go bishop f6, white can just take and he will remain up a piece. So Grischuk played rook takes f1. So with this move, he's also vacating the f7 square for his king. Hikaru gave a check, king f7, Hikaru took a pawn, and king to e8. Now things are not easy here. You might think like, okay, I can just take this rook here, and I'm doing pretty well, right? I mean, I have this passed h-pawn. But the problem is, as soon as you take this rook, black is going to play bishop h3 check. You will have to take this bishop, and now black takes here with a check on the king, and black has a lot of checks here. Black should at least have a draw here, if not more. So Hikaru took on g6 with a check. Now you can block with this rook, but the problem is that after h7, you simply do not have a defense against h8 queen. So Grischuk went to e7, and once again, things are not easy. If you take this rook, black has to move bishop h3, hitting your king, but after you take the bishop, black has a perpetual. Black has a lot of checks with the queen. So Hikaru took on g5 first, and here Grischuk does not have an easy move. If he goes to f7, there's bishop h5, checkmate. If you go to e8, the easiest way to win is queen h5 check, and if you block with the rook, then h7, and white gets a new queen, and white is winning. So the only move for Grischuk here to keep the game going was the move king to d7. Now note that this will also put the white queen under attack. So white can give a check here. Black has to block with this rook, and white can always decide to trade and go h7, and at least, you know, win back this rook for the pawn, and white will have 4 pawns versus 3 pawns for black. So this endgame is always very, very good for black, but even better is in this position, in this position, is to throw in the move bishop g4 check. The king has to step to the side. Now you trade the queens, you trade off these bishops, and now you push the pawn. And this bishop endgame is probably winning because white is up a pawn, and also know that all of the black pawns are fixed on the dark squares, and that is not what you want. You don't want your pawns to be on the same color of your bishop. So this is probably winning for white, but there's still a lot of work to be done. But Grischuk played rook f6. Now this looks very clever, right? He saves the rook, and he blocks a check. But the problem is, well, first of all, they've reached move 40 here. So Hikaru gets an extra half an hour on the clock, and he has a lot of time to figure it out. So he played the move h7. And now white's threat is to take everything on f6 and then queen. So what did Grischuk do? He had to play king d7. Now here you cannot take on f6 because black is going to take with the bishop, and he actually controls the promoting square. So here black is winning. But Hikaru came up with the move queen g8, after which Grischuk already resigned. But the problem is you cannot stop h8 queen. Let's say you go rook h6, now you hang your queen, so that is not going to help. So the one move black has is the move rook f2 check, and here white has to go to the g1 square. It's the only move. If you go to h1, black gets check and you get checkmated, but white simply goes to g1. And here black does not have any checks. I mean, if the rook goes to these two squares, it will just get captured. It looks like black has a very clever move, queen to f4. But here, guess what? Queen g3 is covered, and against the threat of queen h2, white can just queen. Notice that both the queens are covering both these squares over here, and there's simply nothing black can do. Black does not have any checks, and in the meantime, white has his own checkmating attack, hitting both the bishops. So that is why Grischuk resigned. So Hikaru keeps his lead in Pool A. He moves to 4 out of 6, but in the meantime, Andrei Yesipenko managed to beat Etienne Bacrot with the black pieces, so Yesipenko is only half a point behind Hikaru. They will face off tomorrow. In the final round, Yesipenko will also have the white pieces, so a draw will be enough for Hikaru, but of course Yesipenko is going to try to go all out and try to beat him. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next one.